values, I kind of think of them in terms of my North Star, so for me it's the elements that I live by that I really feel authentically connected to. Um, and I mean, I guess more broadly, my values have probably been instilled in me by my parents and my teenage peers, and my friendship group through the years. But I think as I've gotten older too, I have a really strong sense of those that I hold that are my own, that I don't think I got from my parents. They've just become, the sort of embodiment of me. So it's, yeah, rules to live by, I guess, is how I would sort of think of them. I know when I'm not upholding my values, I feel like shit.
Thanks. Who's next? I realized that one of mine is the other day was crossed, and it was around, like, I could tell there was lack of transparency and honesty happening, and I could just feel it, and I was like, and I was kind of being pulled into that as well, around supporting a facilitation or a consultation process that wasn't above the board, and I just refused, and I was like, I just can't. And I got in touch with the person and was like, look, I just can sense that there's stuff that I don't know, and I'm just not participating unless I get all the information. They were like, okay. And then they had to really think, oh yeah, there is stuff that you don't know, and I'm kind of not keeping, I'll tell you. I was like, okay, great. So it was like, yeah, same thing there. You can like feel it. It was like an instinctual thing. And yeah, so it was something around honesty and transparency is a very core value for me.
Thanks. Frank had his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say values for me are things I just care about.
Cool. Who's next?
I can go next. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Sorry about the background noise. So I think for me, my biggest values are like honesty, loyalty, open-mindedness, and like also like learning as much as possible, like having an open mind, like willing to like admit when I'm wrong.
Nice, thanks. Brett.
I can go next. So I think values for me are kind of fundamental characteristics that you truly believe in, and similar to what others have said, kind of that connect with you. I think it was a good question, kind of thinking about how values differ from mission and things like that. I think the one thing that values don't have is like a directional element, whereas missions have some kind of directional element, which is like, here's the goals that I want to reach, right? Whereas values is one of those like stable, unwavering characteristics that you can live by for your life.
Eileen.
To me, values is very implicit. We don't really talk about it, but it kind of drives our character and personality. And so oftentimes it's in our subconscious. I forget about, I think everybody is very aware of their own values, but when you don't really talk about it, it's kind of like you kind of forget that that's sometimes there's a reason for it, why you react a certain way, or like how you make decisions.
Tom.
When I think of values, I think of them as the things that when like no one is watching, they're the things that like sort of guide you in how you operate. That being said, like they are values, I think as Mary like touched upon, like they're influenced by other people. And I think that it is good to recognize that like values do slide, they move, and they're fluid, and they're actually fluid depending on who you're around and the environment that you're in. So like you see situations where people's values change depending on the company they keep and specific situations that might happen in the behavior of others. And I think that's something that it's good to recognize and be aware of, because it's not positive or it can be positive, it can be negative, and you have to think that your values will remain the same throughout your life is that would be quite ambitious if they were to stay constant.
Totally. Thank you. Sean.
Yeah, so totally agree with what everyone's said here. And I think to me, A, it helps in decision making, and B, when I am with my kids, my 3 kids, parents always try to tell them what they are, but you want to sometimes show them as well. So just trying to keep that in mind. Like, what do you want to pass on to your kids or demonstrate as well?
Jenny, you want to go?
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about it. It's like a morals, like right versus wrong type of thing, I guess is how I see values. But it's interesting to think about that word of like what is valuable to in the context.
Gosh, so much coming up for me here. And Jenny just completely thrown me off base, because I need to consider your right and wrong comment, because I've always considered or conceptualized values as something that just is, rather than something that's right or wrong. So I'll be thinking about that. Tom, when you were talking about values changing over the course of one's life, and I think Mary touched on it at the beginning, like I think about my parents' values, let's say around patriotism. I don't necessarily share that same value. And thinking about what are the key times in one's life where your values might go up and down the sliding scale. So that's another way that I think about it. I think that I hold maybe a slightly controversial version, that I really believe that values are the cornerstone to alignment in any organization or any group. And I think that the consultants of the world are potentially selling us somewhat of a bill of goods in extrapolating it out to purpose, right? So the whole idea that everybody has to figure out what their purpose is and align it to the purpose of the organization, I think is super ambitious and probably impossible. And just speak about that from my perspective, like it took me, well into my 40s before I could even articulate a potential purpose for me, had like 15 years of working life before I could do that. So yeah, so that's how I frame the differential between those elements. And I also loved what, I think it was, I can't remember who said it now, but like the directionality doesn't exist in the values, but it exists in those other elements that are equally important, but I think also equally fraught with a lack of common definition and understanding. So thanks, everyone.
Okay, so we need the team list. Do you know?
Yeah, hold on just a sec.
So now we're going to move into just presenting work done on the prototypes this far, and that will take us a little bit of time. We'll be trying to get feedback from you all to each other on this. So do try to consider, what questions can I ask, or what reflections can I make that will, may add to the prototype that someone's shown me, or that may just spark a little bit of new thinking, or maybe something that they may have not considered, or, a constraint that they may have kind of missed. So we're trying to offer feedback as kind of gifts, and that's going to be both these subjects, values and purpose, and feedback are content for next week. So we're kind of warming up. So can I ask team, we've got a lot of people from Totara here. So I'll ask you to go first.
Do you even remember the names of your team? That's Akila, Sean, and Frank.
Should I present?
Yeah.
Okay. So, sorry, I lost that. So, okay, you guys can hear it. Okay, so sorry about the background music. So basically what we put together was, we discussed like what we see as like the problem with the mesh. And I think part of it was like talking about this course and how we could have found it a lot more helpful at the very beginning of the class, or I mean, at the very beginning of like joining consensus. And so our suggestion was to offer this course material to all new hires in like a format where we just have like all the topics and videos and reading links, and it could be like a self-paced thing. Because I think so. We just added all the video links and article links here. Yeah. So I think our idea was like, we'd ideally like to scale this class, but that's probably not reasonable to expect out of all new hires. So instead, we proposed creating this like document that would like have like a course outline. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my question is like the same question I always ask around this question of scale, and I think that you, as a cohort, can answer this better than me. Like, my hypothesis has always been that most of the benefit in this has been actually working on projects in your team, and the readings and the resources are just a tiny part of that. And so my tension has always been, I don't think one can replace the other.
Yeah, I think it's not meant as a replacement, but like a lot of us have come into this class with a certain understanding or like their own conclusions, like how the mesh works and how self-organizing works. And it's also different across different scopes. So I came in, like being part of Pegasus, we've defined a lot of these things. So I came in with like my understanding through that, and also was part of like some working groups for like governance and stuff with Pegasus. Whereas I think like Sean had, sorry for speaking for you, Sean, but like I think he had asked like, oh, like, do you guys, what does accountability mean to you? Like, we actually did come in with an understanding from the scope. But I don't know if you want to speak more to that.
Okay, we might get you.
And so just to ask a question, like what do you think could be like the first iteration on this proposal to clarify that? I love what Tom said, like as a primer or something that is not a replacement for, but something else.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that would be beneficial for all new hires to come in with is to create that shared vocabulary. I think that was a theme that came up over and over again in this class, is like, how do we start talking about the same things? I think the group work and the project build understanding, and that would be too much to ask for a new hire to get that just from a primer, but it's really to build a shared vocabulary, and then this be basically a stepping stone into, okay, great, you want to develop more understanding, then take this full-blown course. So that way it's more of a lead-in, not necessarily a replacement.
Yeah, and I related this to, oh, sorry, Mary. When I first started, I had like a day one list, get your email login, get your Concur, get Greenhouse, read this, etc. Day two, watch the video about Joe, watch this thing about what is consensus, etc. So something like this would be a great starting point for someone brand new, because I was completely brand new. So that's just a suggestion.
So could I ask the team just a framing question? So if you were to frame your hypothesis in the use of this primer, what do you think the outcome of the experiment would be? So you've basically said, give the primer to new hires. What do you think the effect will be, or what do you predict the outcome of that experiment would be?
Should we stop sharing? Sorry, Akila.
I think it would be a shared understanding, just like going off of what Brett said, like a basis and a shared understanding of like what these concepts are and how they work, because we don't really get that anywhere.
Yeah. So how would you test this then? You know, if you wanted to take this prototype and get it out there as a test, what would that experiment look like?
We could test it with people in our own scope. Guinea pig them, like new hires. Actually, no, a few. So.
Can you stop sharing, Akila? Sorry.
So you might notice that I'm nudging you into making a commitment to starting that experiment and telling us all how it goes. Ha
So we'll let them think about that. But any other feedback, reflections from anyone to this? I think it's a great idea, and I'd love to see this happen.
I've got a question though. I think I heard a different proposal in here as well. So one is creating a primer of videos and readings, and I think I heard something different, which is creating a shared vocabulary. Are they the same? Is it a different experiment?
I think they can be the same. Like these resources could be also shared or create a shared foundation for
Hmm. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, there could be a glossary as part of this, right? And then an invitation for people in cohorts, even as they're on in Inspire, we have like onboarding that happens in small cohorts. So when new people are joining, they are part of like a group of 6, and then they get doing similar things, right? Like being in calls, watching videos, reading things, and then they get together to discuss what they're learning. And so maybe the glossary part could really be part of that as well.
Benefit that, yeah.
And Sean has a really good comment. Can you talk to that, Sean? Like, do you mean like you could incorporate this into Academy as such as well? Could you prototype that way to be shared?
Yeah, because I mean, Josh has put a really great onboarding document for people coming into Academy. So it's something that we could potentially slot in and test, as Mary said, with our hypothesis.
Great. I'd be happy to support this to become real if you need help.
Same.
Cool. Okay, let's go to the next group. Who wants to present?
Eileen, Brett.
Okay, go ahead.
Brett, do you want me to share screen?
Yes, please take it away.
Okay.
This is Eileen's brainchild.
Oh, thanks. Nope, it's a shared effort. All right, so okay, so if you guys can see my screen, Brett, Horacio, and I have put together a we call it the SO1014 canon. And so this is a crowdsourced knowledge base on any and all things self-organization and management that is on GitHub. And so the great thing about GitHub is that it's open source. Anyone, so I kind of, this is a little experimentation on my part too, but any changes or additions that can be made by any contributors who have a GitHub account. I think this was partially influenced by there's Consensus has an ETH list that was forked from Scan8, and so like the other piece about this too is that when you are, I guess like if anyone is interested in kind of keeping or sharing this project, they can fork it and then customize it to make it their own. So Brett, do you want to talk about the hashtag idea, and then I can kind of do a little bit of navigation around this?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the ideas that came up as we were discussing is how do we add a viral element to this, right? So that people start thinking and talking about self-organization more broadly. And so there was this idea of creating kind of a set of hashtags that are aligned maybe with the topics within self-organization. At a top level, it's like a promotion to learn SO, right? Learn self-organization. And then maybe you have a hashtag associated with accountability and et cetera. And then each of these hashtags could be linked to a set of topics or a set of materials in this GitHub, so that when people are like, oh, what do you mean by that? You point to a site and you say, here, learn more, right? And again, it's trying to generate that shared vocabulary and shared knowledge across the mesh in a more organic way, without necessarily people having to take this course to start learning about creating that shared vocabulary.
Oh, wait. Am I muted? Can you guys hear me?
No, now you're muted. You weren't muted just a second.
Okay, I can't find my navigation bar. So I think the other thing that we were, I think came to mind was that when we started this course, there were about 20 of us, and now there's about 10. And so I think it's quite an investment for some people to, you know, take the time out of their schedule to be able to attend these classes. However, I would say that at least everyone I've come across we're all, you know, avid learners, and we kind of like learn on our own time. So this kind of gives us an async kind of like a methodology for people to be a little bit more educated on their own time frame and schedule. So yeah, so a lot of these links were supplied by our fantastic instructors. So we just kind of added them in, and we have a page for the terminology that Brett has talked about. And so we can continue to add on to this. And this wouldn't just be for us, it would be for really anybody within the community, anyone on the outside who has more information that wants to share and can be able to contribute. And then the reading list that I think was supplied in the first week, we wanted to incorporate that also for anybody who was interested. And I can share this link with everybody, but if people want to go in and take a look at it, this is basically our prototype.
How do you plan to, what's your hypothesis about testing this? How are you going to announce it? Are you going to invite people? What's the next step?
We can stop sharing.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I was thinking it would be awesome just to launch this maybe in the consensus members channel and associate a hashtag with it. You know, let's promote learning self-organization, right? And start pointing people to this and just see what happens. See if people engage, see if people start, you know, looking at the stuff, see if people start contributing.
Is that a commitment, Brett, that you're going to do that, and by when?
Sure, I will do that by Wednesday of next week.
Woohoo!
I'll work with Eileen on that, on putting the right message together to get this out there.
And then I guess to keep it within a defined time frame for the testing, we can shoot for like maybe 30 days or something and see what the outcome is.
Awesome. Does anyone else, what are people's reflections, questions for this team? Great work.
Maybe we should combine courses.
Yes.
Put it all in the replay.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Like, they're slightly different, but there's a lot of similarity there, and perhaps just all the energy on one of these things could make it really go somewhere. And especially with the alumni, all the people that have been through the training are probably allies in this. So how can we almost use one of these or a combination of these things to reignite some of the energy that maybe is lost, of course, when you all have such busy work lives. And I really, really appreciated that component. Like, yeah, this is a big commitment. The people that stay around are really committed to their own like learning and development journey. And it's not the right time for everyone, but some things like this are going to seed more of an enthusiasm for, and the language, the terminology thing that we keep coming back to, Brett especially, is really key to that. If we do start using all this jargon, people are like, what's going on? Like, we have somewhere to send them. So I love it. Anyone else?
I was thinking Brett could use his multimedia skills and rock out an intro video to the whole thing as well with his awesome voiceover.
Brett's getting a lot of work piled on him, huh? How can we
put that on the roadmap?
Do we have any commitments to help this process from anyone else?
I was just wondering, is SO Dojo the channel that people talk about this stuff in, or is there another channel?
Yeah, I think that SO Dojo and consensus members cross-posting there would be the best plan.
Okay, so I'm sensing there's energy to use the GitHub as a place rather than the Google Docs. Is that correct? Do we have agreement on that? Like, if we can combine the Google Doc into this. Okay, great. I like it.
Tom, did you decide to work with the other team, or have you been working on your own, or have you somehow convened with the other outliers?
I've been working with Madeline and Jenny.
Cool, let's go.
Well, Tom's
Cool.
been doing the work, and Madeline and Jenny were slack.
So we actually had a very specific problem that we're going to show a specific use case of this problem, but it's sort of generalizable. It's the idea of like, because last week we were talking about trust and basically trust in the burdens that people take on. We wanted to create a quick way for a prototype for each of us to essentially do micro surveys, very quick, brief surveys that we could do various pulse checks. So to sort of talk through what each of those are, for Academy, it would be seeing if our communication to the mesh inspires trust, keeps trust the same, or removes trust. That was a question that we wanted to ask to the mesh, and basically track to see like how are we doing in creating transparency. For Madeline, it was a micro survey around it was who do you go to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madeline, is like, who do you go to help?
Like, it's kind of a way, the sort of thing I was having was trying to figure out, there are people within our group who do more sort of stewardship work than others, and sort of having some sort of way of, steward map, like Jenny said, having some sort of way of quantifying, are some people doing more of this work? So sort of have a survey where everyone says, send it off as a one-off. In the last week, I have given stewardship to these people, and I've received stewardship from these people. I mean, you could kind of get a pattern of whether there are like hotspots of people who are doing a lot more of it than others, and sort of surface that. Like, it might be it's okay, but it needs to be acknowledged that that's taking up a chunk of their time.
And then for Jenny, it was the micro survey question was, what do you need and what can you give? And so we actually do have somewhat of the we essentially we use Google to just like create essentially a quick survey builder. So it's like, we knew the problem was like people don't want to go in and build Google Forms and then have to align the spreadsheet. So we just like scripted that out. So you hit a button and it basically will generate your survey for you. It'll create a new survey. You can choose what form you want it dumped in. We're trying to clean it up to make it really quick so people can edit very, very quickly what they want to put in there. A survey essentially gets created really quickly. This is the Academy one. Just like, I want to know did this communication increase, decrease, or have no effect on your level of trust? Put an email in there in case you want to follow up. That's not required. That gets dumped into essentially every time we set it up. So it just gets dumped into so I created a new one. You can get that information. And then we're putting it in basically the bottom of an email, right? So you can actually just, bam, surveys there. So now you choose what you send out when you want to send it. And so like all this you could change. So it might be for that, like, what do you what can you give? What do you need? What can you give, right? And it's there and you can start getting responses. And we wanted to prototype this for all of us, our specific use cases over the next month, to see, for me, it'd be the strategic communication. For Madeline, is to create the stewardship map. And then for Jenny is to create an idea of like, what is it that people on my team need and what is it that they can give? So we think that like micro surveys are a really impactful way that you can start to put in place some of these SO principles, and sort of gauge where you're at.
So Tom, if you were to just sort of synthesize the hypothesis, then are you saying that microsurveys are a useful tool, or how would you frame your hypothesis that the use of microsurveys will?
Microsurveys will make implicit information explicit for and therefore actionable.
And so what results are you expecting to see then emerge?
I think what we're expecting to see, what we want to measure, is two things. I think the first most basic thing is like, do people actually engage, right? Like if you have a micro survey, you have to engage to actually make something implicit explicit. If that's true, right? So that's our first thing. The second is, are we getting information that can, and this is more subjective, right? Once you say like, are people engaging? Two is, do we feel the quality of the information we're getting is actionable, right? Which I think depends on, I think there's some questions that are more suited to that than other ones.
That's interesting. So basically you're almost like taking the pulse of the organization in periodic times and intervals, right?
Yeah, I think obviously MVP, we probably need to draft some guidelines around like, if you're going to use a micro survey, here some practices, thoughts, things that we might learn actually from doing the experiment. But I think like there are certain questions that it's like, is this a good, like there could be questions that might not be set up to be in a micro survey. Karima in the past had mentioned like, people sending out like, hey, I want feedback on how I'm doing. And they send a survey and like the response rates are nothing. So we're sort of on the premise here is like one question that's simple and does force people into options, or having to just name one thing will work. But that's what, we'll test it and we'll see what happens.
And so let me get this right. So the three of you are committing to creating the small form and a link that you attach to various correspondence over the course of the next month with those questions. So we've seen your link, Tom. Madeline's link would be, what would the title of your link be, do you think?
I don't know. I haven't gotten that far.
Right. And then Jenny, I'm assuming it would be, what do you need and what can you offer? Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. So you'll have individual links and your commitment is to put them on all of your correspondence, limited amount of your correspondence? What's your sample size, do you think?
For mine, it's going to be I will put it on correspondence that is internal to consensus, but external to my team.
Great, thanks.
I think what I could do would be on a weekly basis in the MetaMask general, which is where all of my teammates are, be annoying about it.
In what way, Jenny? Can you say what that means?
Oh, sorry. I would just post it once a week and then bother people to fill it out.
Great, thanks.
Can I just ask with the stewardship one, Madeline? I think it's going to come up this question of definition and understanding of what that is.
Yeah, so I think that's the thing. It would have to have some sort of definition or sort of clarifying something about like who's someone you've spoken to for help, like personal, I don't know, not conflicts. Like, I just kind of get a sense there are people within Pegasus who carry a lot more of the weight. If you have the really frustrating meeting and you want to unload on someone about it, like I sense that some people are probably carrying a much bigger load of that than other people because they're good at talking about that stuff.
Do you think it could be something like as simple as like, who have you asked for advice?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And then the other thing that came to me, sorry, was it might be interesting for you to go and interrogate the consensus gratitude channel just to see what people are like thanking people for, because my sense is that's a lot of what's happening in that channel is,
Cool. Anyone else have any questions or feedback? We've got lots of time.
I have a question. Did you have fun?
Okay, so and we can just move this into a broader conversation. Frank, were you part of a team this week? I don't think so. Or you were in with Sean?
That's right. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. So you feel complete? Okay. So we started to move into some interesting noticings about the journey you've been on, which is really good for us. Should we just continue that conversation?
Sure.
Around, the subject of the week was how do we build something that's going to be valuable for other people in consensus or in the mesh who have not necessarily been on this journey, or that will kind of see the principles or the mindset and the approach of self-organizing. These are some really, really great prototypes, I think, some of the best that we've seen, if I'm being honest. And I would say that that's true of this group in general. Like there's something that we've created in this cohort that there is stickability here. And I know that there was maybe 18 people in the beginning and now we've got a bit of fluctuation, and that's okay.
So, I mean, I think that where I'd like to guide our thinking right now is what do you individually think is the minimum viable requirement for somebody in the mesh to have in terms of, I guess, levels of understanding of and or some sort of participation in self-organizing the mesh? Like, what's the minimum viable?
I think for me, the minimum viable understanding is being able to define in a consistent way what self-organizing means. And the fact that self-organizing does not mean no organizing, and it doesn't mean, no hierarchy or no, kind of no structure. I think that's what a lot of people associate self-organizing with, that there is a method to proper and effective self-organizing. And as long as there's that awareness, then people can go and explore further about what this means, right? But I think we need to create that awareness as the baseline starting point across the message.
Yeah, could it be like the mesh-wide agreement on what self-organization is for us? And there may need to be some consultation around that. And maybe it's not gonna, you're never gonna get something that reflects everyone, but if a lot of people are feeling like, yeah, that's true for my experience, that's true from what I understood in this course or from my experience in other organizations, let's at least have this kind of paragraph that goes out on any communications about SO or this course or Team Foundations or any other thing else we're running. What do you think of that?
I think that's a really good idea about how do we start to normalize these shared definitions. So I'm wondering, Brett, if I could just put you on the spot, like if I was to say, hey, Brett, I've just joined your team. What's this self-organizing thing? What would you say? What would your elevator pitch be?
So I think I would say self-organizing is a set of defined processes to build team first agreements of, I'm getting stuck here. Team first agreements of collaboration and working together. So that's how it would start. And then basically say there's a lot of flexibility in terms of individuals' choice on how to participate in self-organization, but you still have these defined roles that you come up with as a team that people basically choose to perform. And that can be fluid, but there is accountability associated with those roles. And all of this kind of rolls up into broader levels of directional. I'm totally failing at that, but yeah, it is hard to kind of crystallize it into a single paragraph.
On the spot. Does anyone want to riff on that and add to what Brett has been starting with? Tom?
I think there's an analogy, like I tend to go to analogies to do this because I think, as I see from like Brett explaining it, there's a lot of, I think with the vocabulary, like that makes it hard. And one thing might be, when someone comes in without that vocabulary, is like the idea of like a flock of birds. Like each bird is choosing to go its own, is traveling in a direction. And by continuously self-directing and aligning, they create something that they can go further faster. And so essentially self-organizing is like trying to create the skills so that people can flock in that way. And I think I'd leave it at that, and then try and get into, get people understand what stewardship is, what terms are, team specific terms that sort of are analogous after that, but try and like root it in something that we see in nature.
I love that. And just riffing off of that, I think there's been parallels drawn for self-organized or teal organizations to kind of living organisms, right? Like if you think about a cell, every piece of the cell plays a vital role. Nobody told that piece of the cell to do what they have to do. There is no hierarchy in that living organism, but there is absolute accountability, because any piece of that falls apart and the entire cell starts to die and wither, right? But I think, yeah, I love the analogy approach to this.
Yeah, great analogy. Sean?
Yeah, I think the question is amazing. And what would have been awesome is that if this question was asked maybe at the beginning of the course and then towards the end, and see how it's changed potentially as well. Because as everyone's mentioned, it's like a bunch of words and analogies to help build an understanding.
Yeah, I agree. And we did ask that in the first training, and I wrote down some of your responses, so I have to try to find them. But that's a really good point. We need to actually capture that in a much more coherent way. So thanks, Sean.
I wonder also if we could take it up one more level, just to humor me. So nobody from people and talent is in this cohort, are they? So one of my things that I've been pushing since day one is be amazing if the first conversation that somebody from the talent team had with somebody that was considering joining Consensus would be to have a one-liner on how is Consensus organized and what different expectations should you have entering a company like this. So what could be the one-liner that every recruiter or person from the talent team slips into that first conversation or is on that first correspondence with the potential candidate?
It's hard.
Hard, right?
What would you put, Susan?
So it's easier for me to talk about it in conversation. So in a self-organized system, the expectation is that you will be hired for your expertise in a particular role, but the expectation is that you'll wear at least one other hat, and it might be like a big hat or it might be a small hat, and that extra hat is contributing to and participating in the governance or the organization of what you're stepping into, because there is no traditional hierarchy. There will be nobody telling you what to do. And the expectation is that everybody stepping into this will make a conscious decision to participate, what level they want to participate, or consciously decide that they don't want to participate in the building of this thing. Something like that.
I would also add, something around being open to personal development or deliberate development with your specific expertise and domain, but also at these other levels as well. That's important for me. Brett?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because we're actually grappling with this right now since we're kind of hiring on our team. I think one thing that came up for me is like you have to be a self-starter in this type of organization, or like be comfortable with charting your own direction. It's not that you don't get advice and don't get general areas of like needs from other people, but nobody's going to come up to you and be like, this is what you're going to do, right? This is what I'm telling you to do. And so I think you have to be comfortable in that and almost kind of thrive off of that type of environment, I think, to really succeed in a self-organizing type of organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I want to just segue this into the checkout question to hear the rest of your voices. So is this working for you, this new way of organizing? Tell us what's going on around what you're experiencing with self-organization. You can structure that, think about that question any way you like, but we're just interested, like, really, how's it going? What are you noticing?
I'll say for me, it's actually been easy because I'm standing on the shoulders of the people on my team who went before me in this class. So there's vocabulary and language that I can use and realize that they know what I'm talking about. And then also because I have Sean with me, there's things that we can self-organize, like back and forth in spaces and in meetings, in other collaborations that can bring some of these principles really are coming into our team now. But I think a big reason they are is because there's like 2 people, I think, who went through this course and another who went through Team Foundation. So like we sort of have there's a baseline there, and then we're adding to that. And so at this point we're almost at like half the team. And I think that's really, I hope that the people who came before us see that and I'm sure there's people in this cohort that's like, you're the only one from your team and like it will take it helps, like it builds upon itself if you can get more people in, because then you start to hit that critical mass and you start to see more of the sharings and you're not doing it all alone, and there's people there to work together. So I think that's the big observation. It helps to have predecessors, and then it helps to then start recommending to the next group, you know, saying, I'm in this course. I think you'd get a lot out of this if you joined this.
Well, interesting. Thank you. Does someone want to bounce off that for their checkout? We'll go next. How's it going for you, Madeline?
Like Thomas, I'm also standing off the back of, so Pegasus has got fairly defined procedures and governance model that's set up around self-organising. I will say I find it works really well within my team. I do find it frustrating at times trying to influence other teams when there is no hierarchy, especially if they're not. Like, there have been times when I've thought, well, if we're in a traditional hierarchy, I'd complain to my manager, they'd talk to their manager, and they'd make them do it. So I feel like that's really the difficult thing. I was just thinking just then that I don't know if actually hierarchy solves that, though, because if people are not living up to their expectations, hierarchy doesn't necessarily change that. It's just someone else's problem, not yours. But yeah, but I do enjoy it, and I do really enjoy I think it was Brett was saying, like the fact that you can get in and you can go, oh, look, I can work well in these areas, I can do this, you know, you can make things work for you, and you've sort of got direct access to people in other teams, whereas in the traditional thing, it's, you know, you have to talk to the manager and then they talk to their managers. So there's kind of this layer of, you can't actually just talk to the other people and figure out what you can do together. So I like that. So yeah, and I think it's great that, you know, people are learning more about it too, because I think, yeah, we keep saying, look, it's one thing if we know about it, but then you've got the shared vocabulary of other people knowing about it and wanting to work towards it. Yeah.
Cool. Lots of insight there. Thanks, Madeline. Who's next?
I think for me, it's made me a lot more aware. Like Malcolm was saying, there's a lot of processes set in place in Pegasus. So I think it was good to like learn the material for that. But I think that the thing that I'm really glad I learned about was like the different types of relationships and relationship dynamics. I've never been exposed to that before, so it was like really insightful.
Nice. Thanks. And great tracks. Starbucks. Thanks, Akila. Brett.
So yeah, I can go next. I think for me, it's been super empowering because I've never been in this type of organization before where I can chart my own path and work on the things that I want to work on. And that's been just really rewarding for me. But I think in somewhat lesser but almost equal amounts, there's almost an uncomfortable level of uncertainty, mainly because I think we don't necessarily have the structures and processes and agreements in place to make it an effective self-organizing organization in many ways. And I think we're taking steps towards getting that as a company. But I think the more people that, again, generate the shared knowledge, shared vocabulary, the better we're going to be. And so I'm optimistic that that's going to happen. And look, there's always going to be a level of uncertainty, which is actually good. But I think we wanted to get to a point where there's some agreements to remove some of those uncertainties around process, mainly, not around mission and around values or around strategy, but around process.
Interesting. Thank you.
I can go. And just like riffing off what Brad, I think I've like hinted a little bit in this group that there is like some big work going on around scaffolding the agreements and scaffolding, you know, providing that actual clear processes and methods for how self-organizing can work in Consensus 2.0. I think, you know, without sharing too much, I've been doing like very intensive work with 3 or 4 of probably the most influential people in this organization. And I'm making them do the work, and they're actually doing the work. And I'm actually seeing them transform their way of thinking. So I'm feeling more positive than I've ever felt. In like literally, I've had 6 or 7 hours with this team this week, and oh my God, it's actually kind of working. So next week might be different, but this week it feels good.
I love that, making them do the work, quote unquote, Susan Westerfield. Thanks, Susan. Who's next? We're a bit over. We'll probably be 2 minutes late. I think 3. So jump off if you have to. But Eileen?
I would say that I guess like piggybacking off of Akila, it was, I think the awareness of relationships was kind of eye-opening. I think a lot of people place enough, I think, functional trust in myself. So I think they see me in an adult relationship, an AA relationship, but I think I constantly put myself in a C relation, like a CP relationship where I'm the C, and I think it's really helping me to try to elevate myself so that I can at least be on the same level as them. And I think it's just interesting because like there are a lot of processes, and I don't think all of them will work for every scenario, but it will work for certain like teams and like I guess like micro teams within my team, where we can do like a check-in, check-out, and for other ones we'll do like objection, and so it's kind of nice being able to have this like entree of different things to choose from, so that it gives us more of a self-organization. Or helps us become a little more self-organizing.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Eileen. It's super good to hear. Frank, can I call on you?
Sure. Yeah, it's been going very well so far. I think after taking this course, I've started noticing a lot, sort of the different hierarchical, I guess, themes that you notice in other organizations, and it sort of made me more aware and more outspoken in my teams. It was especially good to hear about like the adult to adult parent-child dynamics, because that's something I never learned before, and it's great to know those sort of aspects so that I can help, sort of combat that within my own team, and sort of help my own teammates, be, try to strive more towards adult relationships. And so it's been good.
Thanks, Frank.
Can I just say, Frank, that I've noticed like a huge transformation in you from the beginning of this course. So it's what you're sensing is visible.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Sean?
Yeah, so I've been working in the last 6-7 years in a remote distributed hierarchical team. And then I come here, and then it's like a remote distributed non-hierarchical. So I'm still in the old mindset. But inside Consensus, I do feel I fit quite well into it, particularly because I'm a self-starter, I'm a go-getter, I wake up early, etc. Not Gary V next level stuff, but just a little step here. So yeah, I'm enjoying it, and the team's amazing.
Great. Got to wake up early to do self-organization. I think that should go on the tagline as well. Thanks, Sean. And also the person typing is me, just so you know, not Susan. Cool. Jenny?
Yeah, sure. I guess what I've been thinking about with the self-organization coursework or the toolkit is about power distribution, I guess. And I feel like all of the things that we've learned have made it easier for us to like relate to each other, or like gain access to that power through these tools, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
Awesome, Jenny. Nailed it. Mary?
Yes. So, I mean, obviously, I've been on this course as a trainer / learner, because it's the first time I've attended it. I think for me, I've always had a theory of change that if you gave people the tools and the practices to pay attention to their own membrane and how it interfaces with the world and also the system, that it could just unleash so much potential, not just in our workplaces, but in our communities. I think for too long we haven't been allowed to use those tools, or those tools haven't been named. And for me, that's what self-organizing does. It gives us those superpowers. And so the more people that have the superpowers, the better we are ultimately going to be as a society and as a species. Actually, as a whole world. It'll be good for the animals too. So I've loved it. And I've loved this team so much. I'm going to miss you guys.
Yeah. Oh, we've got one more week. I just want to riff off of that and say maybe we do need to make some big changes in this world. Like there's a bigger problems out there, right? And I think a lot of what this is about is it's not what we do, it's just how we do it is going to be really, really crucial to, I don't know, I worry a lot about the human species and the end of the world. And I think we need to do a lot to get back on track, and it's how we show up to do that that's going to be really important, and that's what self-organization is for me. And yeah, great, thanks Madeline. That will conclude us for the call today. SO1014, become vegans that get up at 5 a.m.
That's the key.
It's really that's gonna get them all coming in.
Software developers are well known for their fly for early mornings.
And carbon neutral. Right?
No more flying.
Yeah.
Okay, we will see you on Monday. We have Brian coming from Sobel, and I'm sending the reader out after this. It's not too long.
Cheers.
Sorry.
Have a great weekend, everybody. See ya.
Or Friday.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Oh, you're still there. Yay.
Hi.